Let's start recording. So it's Caroline Stevens seeking the truth as normal. And we've been talking about the Constitution. We've been talking about the Queen all of last week. And what are we going to be talking about in today's show, Greg? Over to you. But actually, for people who've never come across you, Greg, would you like to introduce yourself, please? The man from New Zealand.
Okay, my name's Joseph Gregory Hallett. I have been laying claims through the court for the status of Prince Pretender, and I've just found a statement of claim and notice and affidavit, a court notice with addendums that is 130 pages long. The intro is 8 pages, and I did it in August 2016, and it looks like 23rd of April 2018. I'd actually forgotten I'd done it, and that covers that Elizabeth's titles are all fake, and that I refer to previous legal documents where I've reasonably successfully, more than half successfully, been acknowledged as the Prince Pretender to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And that's
actually acknowledged it.
The Queen's Court, High Court Queen's Bench.
Right.
Right. So that was nice of them, and they did it in the only way they could, which was passive acquiescence and cognitive avoidance. And they did that by I lodged it in the Worcester High Court Queen's Bench, which is where King John I is buried, and that's why I did it there, because I'm King John III of the United Kingdom, and as Prince Regent Duke Governor, which means king to be. So I lodged it there as for the status of Prince Pretender, and that was about 600 pages, and they accepted that by passive acquiescence and cognitive avoidance. Now, I should have had a hearing in about 2 weeks, but they actually sent all of my documents to Temple Bar and the Royal Courts of Justice for 2 months for them to look at on how to deal with the case, right? And they recognized that it was true, and they had to acknowledge it in terms of the high orders of things, but they wanted to not acknowledge it in terms of honouring their oaths to Queen Elizabeth II, and it all comes down to the oaths. And the reason, which we discussed, I think, in the second interview we did, the reason why so many lords disappeared in 1999, 266 lords, and then another, it's about another 600 lords a few years later, was because we had opened up the chest full of royal marks from Queen Victoria confirming that we were the true royal family. And then I was brought in to decipher the marks. And then the Sangreal, who's the prime descendant of the Jesus Mary lineage, he's also Queen Victoria's great-great-great-great-grandson. He and myself then represented the end times, and then I ended up representing the New Age, and also the times of the end, and that was in 2014 and 2017.
Can I just interrupt you there? How does that work when you say one of you represents New Age? Can you just talk me through that, please?
Yeah, okay. So you've got, like, in Jesus, who held the title Christ, in his times, he represented the end times New Age changeover, and that's shown in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Right. And the New Testament was actually written between 700 and 710 AD in Newcastle, then monk swear mouth, right? And they've bowdlerized monk swear mouth to monk wear mouth.
Ah, yes, I was going to say, right, okay.
Right, and that was in a boggy ground. The monastery was surrounded by very boggy ground, and that boggy ground was called Yahweh.
Right.
Right. Boggy ground is ground that stops the enemy coming in and protects you. It's the great protector, Yahweh, muddy bog. Right? So people are lurching between what the name of God is, and they keep on getting it wrong.
The real name of God is Yahweh.
Is that what you're saying?
I believed it was.
I don't think it is.
What is it? What do you?
Well, the New Testament was actually written in Newcastle in Northern England, right?
Right.
The Testament was written in England,
Yeah.
and where it was written was surrounded by a muddy bog called Yahweh, right? And the monastery it was written in was called Monksware Mouth, and the Venerable Bede had a lot to do with it. He actually bred 2,000 cattle to produce the vellum to write the Bible on.
So what do you believe the name of our God actually is?
Maybe God.
Right. Okay.
I don't know, actually. I would have to go through and think about it and say some stuff, and then, I'd have to look at it. But I think Yahweh is not the name of God. Not the name of God.
So when you say that you represent New Age, what do you mean by New Age?
Well, you got all of these orders, right? And these orders go up in different levels and different amounts of, well, let's say purity or force. And you get right up the top of the orders, and they are acting on the 2,000-year cycle, right? So you got the Freemasons, they act on the 100-year cycle, and as with the Zionists, all the decisions are made in the 97 year, like 1897 and 1997, for the next 100 years, right? And then the Rosicrucians tend to deal in the millennium, in the 1,000-year cycle, and the Priori de Sion tends to deal in the 2,000-year cycle, or more accurately, the 2,150-year cycle.
Who's that? 2,150.
Priori de Sion. And all of these organizations split at the cutting of the elm, which was about 1118. So we were asked to represent the end times, and we were asked about the 2nd of June 2014. So we accepted, and the other thing that was told on the phone call is that we want a sacrifice, and you're the sacrifice. So I was the sacrifice for the end times, and then due to a betrayal, I ended up representing the New Age. And I did it at the exact location that was predicted, which was in a cave overlooking the sea in the Algarve. And that was the same location that Sir Walter Raleigh visited. And when he drew that cave in his Rosicrucian cosmography in 1618, he named me on it, right? And he drew the rock in the cave, and he drew his ship Ark Royal over the top of it. So, and then I was given the Royal Mark as the key to the Rosicrucian cosmography and the key to the end times New Age, which is this one here, which I keep in the head of the apocalypse.
So on YouTube, you'll be able to see the key. Was that the key that you showed us last week?
Yeah, and it's also the key to Prince Regent Duke Governor of North America, because Sir Walter Raleigh was given the kingship of North America by Elizabeth I. And here I am, Sir Walter Raleigh's descendant, or more accurately, he was stripped of his knighthood, and it is Walter Raleigh, and it is posthumous Walter Raleigh because he escaped his execution. And so I ended up becoming a descendant of posthumous Walter Raleigh. And he held the Prince Regent Duke Governor status of North America. And this is the key to the Rosicrucian cosmography that he drew. And he drew the Rosicrucian cosmography in my cave from the book of predictions he had just got under the nose of Captain Howard, Lord Effingham. And yeah, so we ended up with a book of predictions, which was the resurgence of Rosicrucianism, which is essentially the bridge between the Egyptian mysteries and the Christian mysteries.
Where do the Egyptian mysteries come into this, though? Because is this not a bit sort of working on the dark side?
Not really. The 18th dynasty of the Egyptian mysteries were the first to hold up the sun as the center of religion, and having a monotheistic religion with one God, right? And then
But you're not talking about a sun god, though, are you?
Well, no, we're talking about the sun. The sun as
Oh,
God. The sun as the bringer of life, which it is,
right.
Obviously. And, you know, and there's many ways to read the Bible. And one of the ways is to read it as a gardening almanac.
Well, yeah, it's like a sat nav, isn't it, really? It's a map, a road map, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a road map. So the interesting thing about the Bible is that it is a book of predictions, and a lot of the predictions that are in the Bible have come true and are coming true. And sometimes you can't actually break the codes until you actually see the prediction manifest, which I find extraordinary. I mean, it's in terms of a book of predictions, it's fantastic. And perhaps that's why it's written in the past, present, and future tense, right? And there's also a thing in the Bible, the oldest Christian science is, and not many Christians seem to know about it, it's called typology theology. And that is that what happened in the Bible is due to happen again in another place.
When you say another place, you mean another planet?
No, another place. Like Portugal or England or both, right? So, and Portugal is actually known as the second Jerusalem.
Because England is the first Jerusalem.
No, Jerusalem's the first Jerusalem. Portugal's the second Jerusalem, and I'd say that England is the third Jerusalem, but only about 3 years later. Right, so Portugal and England are actually concurrent. They have the longest treaty together from about 1386, but there's actually an older treaty which is in 1150, and that was the treaty between the Christian Templars and the Muslim Islamic and their Mahdi, right? So their top person. And I've been advertising that I would like to invoke the treaty, the Christian Templar Islamic treaty, the oldest treaty on the planet, to balance out the whole immigration breeding invasion, passive invasion scenario. The Islams, you know, do they have a Mahdi? Do they have one? Are they leaderless?
Well, that's interesting because I mean, off air, just before we came on the show, we were just chatting about the fact that last year we signed the Marrakesh Declaration, and that means we've got free movement. Forget about the European Union. That's just a Trojan horse. You know, we are part of the United Nations like so many of the other countries. So we've signed this Marrakesh Declaration with France and Austria and Mali and Cameroon and Ghana, for them to allow them to have free movement of travel to the UK and France. So people from Africa coming up, you know, some of them will be coming through France. So that's why 4 months later, they said they were going to look at Calais and sort Calais out. But it seems to me that they're processing the immigrants quicker so then they can move up to the UK. So yes, so we're going to have lots more people who are Muslims in particular coming up from Africa. I mean, with the relocating Syrian people to the UK, I don't believe that any of them have actually been Christian. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like Theresa May was saying, we're bringing in Syrians, and what came was sub-Saharan Africans with perhaps one Syrian on board who was on board on most of the boats as someone to be photographed. And the Africans were pushing off from the jetties in North Africa, and then the people from Greece were going over and motorboats and big ships, and the bigger ships would go and even the motorboats would pick up the Africans 100 meters off their own jetty in North Africa and then bring them across to Europe as though it was a rescue close to shore. But they're actually going and getting them.
Well, of course, now we've got the debacle with the RNLI, who are bringing in the migrants from the coast of the south of England. So it's a replication now, because they're moving, the migrants are moving up to France, and they're coming in that way. I mean, I was just saying on my show earlier, going down my high street now, I mean, it was 99.9% white until probably 2 years ago, 1 year ago. And now it has really dramatically changed. It's not just the big issue person. It's not just the people at the Indian restaurant. There are houses in my town that have lain empty for a very long time. No one probably seems to know who owned those houses. And all of a sudden, children's toys are arriving, and you know, different sort of styles of clothes, shall we say. So it has changed. It is changing very rapidly in parts of the country which have never seen anything like this before. But you see, most people go to work, come home. They probably don't even look at their local area until maybe a Saturday, probably nip into town, buy a bit of shopping, and back home again. They're not noticing that these people are wandering our streets during a working day. And you know, what's all that about? They're the ones who actually seem to be able to afford the better supermarket goods than perhaps the indigenous population now.
Yes. Everything that we wanted, which was no debt, a 3-bedroom house, a 2-year-old BMW, and all of our groceries paid for, and all of our electricity and gas paid for, and having a free TV and free internet and free connection to, say, Netflix, and free education. So basically, you know, and being comfortable for the rest of our lives, which would be, let's say, we've worked all our life and that's millionaire status, but we realise that from the resources of our land, that we should be given that as a birthright and then build up from there. All of that has been given to the blacks, who have just invaded by immigration, and they've been given freehold 3-bedroom houses, a 2-year-old BMW, free groceries, free clothes, free toys, free TV, free internet connection, free Netflix connection, and £1,200 a month, right? Which is millionaires. So they've all come in and become millionaires straight away, just for the point of view of destroying our culture by non-integration.
Well, not only after my video on Sunday did I have somebody from Algeria saying he was packing his bags because it was on the border to Mali, and he was on his way, but then I was getting random people from various parts of Africa sending me messages on personal messenger saying, "Hi, are you there?" And of course, you know, word spreads very quickly. They've all got mobile phones.
Yeah, so what are they bringing you for?
Well, I guess the good news that I said, you know, I was alerting the British people to the fact that, what is it now, 16, 18 months ago, we'd signed a pact saying all these people can come over. That's part of the deal.
Part of what deal? With whom?
This is the Marrakesh Declaration, which was signed in Marrakesh. I guess the King of Morocco is a Jew, and his daughter is the ex-French culture minister. Well, we've only just seen how culture has changed dramatically in France. So she did a good job in France, and now she is she's the 7th most important Jew in the whole world. She runs UNESCO.
Right, so UNESCO behind it.
It's all tied in. It's all blown up.
Well,
so you all these countries in Africa, which are, you know, like Mali's got uranium. Most of these countries have got gold, silver mines, precious stones. So I wonder why anybody would want to go there and do business. But is it doing business? No.
Well, it might be that England and France can go and mine in those African countries in exchange for the black people living there going to France and England and being given millionaire status. That might be the deal.
Well, the women and children are invited to come. I think the men, I guess the men are going to be staying there to keep the compound secure, to maybe do the mining. And that's why they've got, so if all the women and children come over here, I guess they will eventually die out if there's no women to reproduce. But then they've used those people to mine, haven't they?
I think that's a fallacy. I think that when we had the black invasion through Europe and through Turkey and Greece and then up through Europe to France and then to Calais to England, that those people were 99% military fit black men. And I think that the Marrakesh Agreement was really about having the women and children join them.
Well, exactly. And what people don't realise is that, you know, even with this open door immigration, even if we had agreed to leave the European Union at the end of on the 31st of October, the immigration was still going to continue. And we're also going to be people, you know, Boris Johnson is a big supporter of this agreement called CANZUK. And this is an agreement between, and, you know, be close to your heart, New Zealand, Australia and Canada and the UK. So this is a trading agreement with free movement. So, you know, it doesn't take much of a brain, does it, to join the dots where we're going to have all these Africans coming into the UK. And then the UK is also joined with free movement to the major countries of the Commonwealth, all basically the white countries that, you know, the greatest percentage.
The White Commonwealth. It's called the White Commonwealth. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are called the White Commonwealth.
There you go. So basically, so all the Africans coming into our country will then be free to go to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So if anybody's listening to this for the first time, that's the reality.
Yeah. What Elizabeth wants to do is to destroy the entire culture of England and the United Kingdom and all of the colonies, because it's become patently obvious to her that she is not the Queen, and patently obvious to her that she has been abdicating to me since 1968. And I've just found a 130-page affidavit and statement of claim called Patent Ambiguity of Queen Elizabeth II's Royal Style and Titles, Court Notice, Public Notice, which I could read out. It's about 8 pages, or I could start reading it out and finish reading it out in another interview.
So what is this? Who's written this?
I have, and I've just discovered that I'd written it and I'd forgotten about it. It's another one of these large documents I've forgotten about. But a lot of the documents overlap in their material, and some of them are actually already lodged and accepted in court. Which is quite good. Yeah, and the 26th of November 2014 notices to remedy, 16th of January 2015 notice of fault and opportunity to cure, 6th and 9th of February 2015 notices of default, all notarized in apostille for international use, and the 16th of February 2016 notice of royal chart remaining unchallenged and undisputed by the 1st of January 2017. After which all statements of claim are deemed to be in a decided state, stare decisis, and accepted in favour of Joseph Gregory Hallett to the fullest extent. So I did a royal chart showing the illegitimacy of the British royal family and got it to Elizabeth, who then acknowledged it with a massive cocaine drop, 360 kilograms of cocaine on the coast from me. And
no, Greg, right, okay.
Yeah.
Are we?
Do you want to hear about that? Do you want to hear about how royal things are actually acknowledged? They're actually acknowledged with heroin dumps, cocaine dumps, and flyovers. and occasionally a Navy ship turning up outside your front door and saluting you. That's how acknowledgements are done.
So where did this cocaine get dropped?
Well, it got. So what happened is I got a royal chart. I did a royal chart in 2016. 16th of February 2016, notice of royal chart. So I'd had it done well by then. It took about 1,500 hours to do it. It's quite complex. And then it took about 10 years of research before that to find all the stories of the illegitimacies. And there's 23 illegitimacies on the main trunk line of the British royal family and only 2 legitimates.
Who are the 2 legitimates then? Because it'd be easy to cover those 2.
King George VI is the son of King George V. Prince Charles is the son of Queen Elizabeth. Everyone else is illegitimate.
Right, because it's always we're talking about males, aren't we?
No, we can talk about females as well. Like the 4 daughters of Queen Victoria were all illegitimate.
I thought Princess Anne was legitimate.
Princess Anne is legitimate, but she's just stood to one side. I was just referring to the primary firstborn.
Right, okay. Because I know we discussed Princess Anne, that she is the daughter of Queen Elizabeth and Philip.
Yeah, that's right. But Elizabeth is illegitimate. And so Edward VII, who ruled 1901 to 1910, he was illegitimate. His supposed son, George V, who ruled 1910 to 1936, he was illegitimate. He was actually the son of Tsar Alexander III of Russia. And Queen Elizabeth is illegitimate. And Prince William is illegitimate. Prince Harry is illegitimate. And Prince William's son, Prince George, is officially illegitimate because Theresa May, as Home Secretary, had one job to do, and that was to be present at the birth of Prince George to, supposedly the parents are Prince William and Kate Middleton. But
really? I didn't know that.
But Theresa May, Home Secretary Theresa May, went to Europe on a holiday for a week to absolutely certify that she was out of the country, to absolutely certify that Prince George is not a legitimate child. He is not legitimized. Right, and then Kate Middleton came out of hospital with the baby, but she's still wearing her faux pregnancy belly. So she was just as pregnant when she came out having given birth as when she went in supposedly giving birth. And then when Prince William got the baby and put it in the car, he kind of dropped it in a car seat rough enough to damage its head, head, brain, fluids, spine connection. Yeah, so that was either a rubber baby or it is an uncertified child, which is interesting because his name's George, and I met King George VII in New Zealand, who was George VI's son, conceived in the order. So they're all working on the predictions, and I'm part of the predictions. So what my affidavit is about is the predictions, what they are, and then how I'm named, and how Queen Elizabeth has also named me, and then how she's abdicated. And one of the ways that Elizabeth is continually abdicating is by destroying the entire British Empire and Commonwealth and colonies and English culture and British culture just before she dies, and just before it becomes patently obvious to everyone that she's not the Queen and never has been the Queen. And she wants to hand over nothing. It's the bitch factor.
So when you say she will not hand over anything, they're supposed to be building a property for her and her family in America. So yeah, I heard this. It's she was supposed to be in Germany, but she's heading for the USA. So Elizabeth. I don't know. Were you aware of that? No.
It's just Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth. Or Elizabeth, the Suffolk Queen. No, I've heard nothing about that. Nothing about that.
Well, it's just that if she goes off and doesn't tell you where she is, how will you then be able to contact her in the future?
Well, there's two Queen Elizabeth. She's got a body double called Mrs. Sanderson, right? And it's
Yeah.
Mrs. Sanderson who's actually on the coins.
Right, where is she then?
She's just hiding about and being hidden. Mrs. Sanderson has a slightly different chin. And when Elizabeth, Queen, was sick with the flu, I think it was in Christmas 2016, Mrs. Sanderson actually gave the Christmas speech.
I heard that the Queen had died in 2016.
No, that was a rubbish story based on London Has Fallen, which is the plans for how will London react if Elizabeth dies. So they did a live sort of test case. So they spread the rumor a little bit in the media to see what the reaction would be. And I think the reaction is going to be, thank God.
Do you know this, believe it or not, Greg, outside this little bubble we were in at the moment, you know, you talk to people in the street and they still believe the Queen is okay. They just haven't twigged it all.
Well, they just don't know anything. A lot of those people don't know anything. Most people know nothing about anything at all. And they'll come across as an authority and they'll come across opinionated and they have an opinion, but they can't back it up. Most people do no research whatsoever about anything. They are floaters.
But it's interesting because, you know, we've had this court case with Boris Johnson today. And, you know, I never expected, you know, people will back me up. I never expected anything to come of any court case because everything is geared to supporting the Queen and covering everything up from her perspective. I mean, you know, who signed us into the European Communities Act in the first place? Was she not party to this?
Yeah.
Privy Council?
She did it in 1st of January 1973, which is exactly the same time that she was signing over the royal styles and titles of Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and what's it called? Grenada to me. And that's all codified. It's also in many movies. It's codified in many movies like Logan, the last Wolverine movie, the X-Men movie. Logan came out in 2017. That codifies the royal styles and titles handed over to me. And at the end of the movie, Wolverine changes his name to my name. Joseph. Yeah, he changes his name to Joseph Hallett. The end of the movie.
Right, so going back to that document that you prepared.
One thing that's also interesting is at the same time that Logan was being filmed, the military came around and took me to hospital and changed my name to Gregory Howlett, Hollett, which is the name of Wolverine. He was James Howlett and then changed his name to Joey Howlett, and then my name was changed from Joseph Hallett to Howlett. So we ended up having our names crossed over at the same time that it was being filmed and then shown. It's bizarre what they do. You know?
It is very bizarre, actually.
And they're very, very particular. So going back to the royal chart that I did, I gave notice to Queen Elizabeth that unless she rebutted this, it was to take effect from the 1st of January 2017, that I was the Prince Pretender to the throne and crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And rather than rebutting it, she accepted it and acknowledged it with a flyover with two like F-17 jets flying up the main street, incredibly low at like 1,000 feet, and sounding like it sounded like standing right next to a Formula One motor car. And they flew exactly up the main street and exactly overhead. And people wrote letters to the military bases complaining that the planes had stripped tiles off their roofs. Right? And then Prince Philip invented this thing called Seahorse, and it was used for drug trafficking. And basically, when people were dropping drugs out at sea, they would attach a seahorse to it and the drugs would sink down, and then the seahorse would rise up and it would scream, and you had to have a decoder that recorded like a double frequency, and that would give the location of the drugs, right? So that was called a seahorse. So what happened exactly 40 days after the 1st of January 2017, which is the 9th and 10th of February 2017, is 300 kilograms of cocaine ended up on the beach closest to me, and another 60 kilograms of cocaine a little bit further up. Now, each of those two locations, there's 3 different roads to get to those 2 locations, and all 3 locations are exactly 40 miles drive from where I am, and it was 40 days later, and it was 360 kilograms of cocaine, which means the full picture, right? And it also means the Templars, right, which are in charge of kingship. Right. So these drugs were meant for Prince Philip, who's the biggest cocaine and heroin trafficker in the world, right? And the military or whoever was dropping them had failed to attach Prince Philip's seahorse, so no one could find the drugs, so they washed up on shore.
And that was reported in the local papers.
It was, yes, and on the mainstream news and on international news, right? So the way that's one of the ways they acknowledge things is with flyovers and with cocaine and heroin drops.
And you see, a lot of people out there wouldn't believe that the King and Queen, well, Prince Philip, I should say, and Queen Elizabeth have the big, it's all to do with the Opium Wars, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's been going for hundreds of years. They never stopped. And heroin and cocaine and laudanum and opium were all legal, and all of the royals were using it. Even at the royal dinner parties, they're all using it. They're all having some snuff. And that was going on at least until 1913, if not 1933.
So how would you know whether somebody had been taking cocaine then? Because I'm very innocent on this sort of thing. How would you know that somebody had taken it?
Had taken it? Well, I don't know. Watch my.
I know people lose the nose, the inside of the nose, don't they?
Yeah, there's actually an MP in Parliament, in British Parliament, who lost a piece of his nose. I think it was George Osborne. He is a massive coke user. Yeah, it's completely useless. That's why they gave him 9 jobs, so he can fail at all of them.
No, he's just the yes man, isn't he? He's just a front man. I mean, he was the one that his chief what is it is in the Standard paper, is the editor of the Standard, is it? Evening Standard in London, and he's the chief executive of the Northern Powerhouse.
Yeah.
Hi, George.
Yeah.
He's not related to the royal family at all, is he?
Well, all jobs that he can fail at. But he was in the Bullington Club, I believe.
With David Cameron and Boris Johnson.
Yeah. So he's very good at failing at everything he touches. So he was the main assistant to David Cameron, who was a heroin and opioid trafficker in Africa. And George Osborne is renowned for taking coke and getting a fat black S&M mistress to whip him while he's in doggy style with a number 8 pool ball in his mouth, strapped around, getting his ass whipped.
It is quite amazing, actually, that we accept. I mean, I've seen pictures of this. You know, I'm sure it's been in the mainstream news.
It's been cartoons. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, I posted on my timeline today about the fact that Boris Johnson had these allegations against him about this money being granted to this ex-model, and people immediately thought, oh, what's that? You know, it doesn't matter. I'm saying I'm bothered about the money. Where's that money come from? You know, I go out and feed the homeless, and then I see that Boris Johnson has granted money of 130,000, was it US dollars, and he gets, what is it, £75,000 for a 2-hour speech. And I'm going out in pouring rain this morning and seeing guys in the street who've got nowhere to go from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night for some of them. And I mean, it just doesn't add up, does it?
No, none of it adds up. None of it adds up because the Queen's a fake, right? And the true Queen of England is Olga Maria, and she was born in 1930. I've spoken to her on the phone, and she had, what was her birthday? Her birthday was the 2nd of August, 1930, and the Queen Mother. In Portugal, and she speaks fluent Latin actually, as well as Portuguese. She's a beautiful sounding voice when I spoke to her, which is about 2011, I think. Yeah. So we're living in a non-reality, and they're really trying to stretch that non-reality to take over every aspect of reality we once had, so that there is no reality, and that the educated people, who are all self-educated, although the internet helps, they're a minority, and the stupid people who know exactly what's happening in the stupid media and the stupid fashions and the stupid soccer, they're the masses, and they can actually talk to each other, and the people who actually know what's good for themselves and others are a minority held in suspicion.
Well, going back to the immigration situation, in that Marrakesh Declaration, it was quite clear that they were building in some new rules and regulations to ensure that the British population did not rebel against this. You know, hate laws being put in. You can't say who the people behind all of this, because all this information seems as if it's going to be notched up against your name. You know, they know your VPN, they know the sites you visit, they know what you share, they can read all your emails. They talk about having the upper hand.
Yeah, mainly it's about destroying the English and British culture, and the person who's mainly behind that is Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. And they don't give a damn about all of their sons being exposed as pedophiles, and even convicted pedophiles. They'll just carry on regardless, destroying the culture. And they almost use their sons, Prince Charles, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward, as examples on how to destroy the culture, you know? And there's no better way to destroy a culture than pedophilia. And also stealing children off fathers especially, but also fathers and mothers, and then putting them into government care, which leads to about a 90% sex worker rate. So if you get the sex workers, 90% of them have grown up in government care. So the government is actually stealing children off families as future prostitutes, but also as child prostitutes.
Well, we have that debacle of an MP recommending it to be a worthy occupation.
That's just to remove their guilt. Now, Prince Philip is also advertising that people should become cannibals. Right? It's been in the papers in the last week or so, 10 days. And I think that's because Prince Philip is a homosexual pedophile and has been killing underage boys, having sex with underage boys, killing them and then eating them. And he's trying to normalize his own cannibalism.
Well, he set up the World Wildlife Fund, didn't he? And they've now got, I mean, these places in Africa, they've been used actually as training military people. That'd be right. And they've wiped out it's now an extinct tiger through this World Wildlife Fund. And you see on the high street people coming up to you with their little clipboards. Do you want to donate? You know, will you sign up? Will you fill in a direct debit? No.
Yeah. People don't know what they're doing with the charities. The organised charities are usually about collecting funding for something that's really wrong. And the World Wildlife Fund is about only the super wealthy can hunt wild animals. And it also gives the super wealthy in charge of the World Wildlife Fund huge land areas to do whatever they want on. And they'll even kill the local tribes people who actually kept a lot of the wildlife in balance, so that if one animal's going to kill another, that one animal isn't too dominant, and that only the local people can do that effectively. That is actually what they do, and they're wiping them out as well, you know. And it's a massive con. So what happened when I exposed King Juan Carlos of Spain as being the father of Prince William? Someone who's married to the Saxon-Coburg and Gothas, Germans. He said to me, "What's going to happen next?" And I said, "King Juan Carlos of Spain is going to abdicate." And 6 weeks later, he did abdicate, and he abdicated because King Juan Carlos was the honorary president of the Royal Almanac de Gotha, which records the parentage of all the royals. And King Juan Carlos of Spain had failed to record that he was the natural father of Prince William of England. So they took him to Africa on a World Wildlife Fund hunt and broke his leg. And the leg represents kingship. So then he came back to Spain, and I was next door in the Algarve. Portugal's Algarve is on the south coast. And I was about 9 paces from a 40-foot cliff. And at the exact same time that King Juan Carlos of Spain was announcing that he was going to abdicate, which was 10 a.m. on the 31st of May 2014, Portuguese Navy came right outside and saluted me.
So he has a record of your details, and so has he been disseminating information about you to all the other royal families then?
Well, it's all held on the predictions, so they know exactly who I am. And my birth was predicted in the between 100 and 200 AD by the Hebrews, and that's the exact time of my birth and the country that it would be in. So that was known, and because it was predicted in Israel, that New Zealand and Israel did not have daylight saving together, and then got daylight saving together at the same time in order for the two time zones to be easy to correlate, which is New Zealand's 10 hours ahead of Israel. So I was born on the exact day and the exact year, month, day and minute predicted. So they knew a good chance that it was me that was predicted. And because my name was one of the predicted names, they knew it was me. They didn't tell me. There are a few indications. So they all know exactly who I am. And then I've been given the royal marks commensurate with those predictions.
Why did your mum call you Greg or Gregory?
Well, it was actually after Gregory Peck, which
I thought you were going to say that.
Well, every mother's got a fantasy, you know. So that fantasy was obviously before I was born. So what I'm doing on www.kingof.uk on my website, kingof.uk, is I'm adding the images to what I spoke about in my interviews with you, and I've got part 1 up, and I've just finished part 2, and I'm about to load that up, and that's the one that shows the images of Roman Holiday, which is an anagram of H royal domain, as in the transfer of her royal domain to his royal domain, which is Hallett. And Gregory Peck is in that, and he's playing the character Joe, hence Joseph Gregory. And the name Hallett comes up 4 times in that movie. And Joseph Gregory sits on the bed with a crown above his head. So I've got that image in there now. And then Princess Anne, who plays Elizabeth, stands next to the bed, and then next to her is a crown and a 0. And Princess Anne says, I'm not, right? Not the Queen. So, you know, that was 1953, and that was the same time that Elizabeth had all of her royal styles and titles removed. So she has only ever had colour of law styles. Nothing real. There's nothing real about Elizabeth at all. Nothing.
But she still underwent a fake coronation oath.
A fake coronation oath and a secret Catholic coronation oath, and wearing the Catholic crown and sitting on the dummy coronation stone, right? Because the Scottish Freemason students, Lewishmen, they stole the real coronation stone at 4 a.m. on Christmas Day 1950, and the doors of Westminster Abbey were open and unlocked. And in those days, everyone went to bed at like 7:30 or 9 o'clock and then got up at 5 or 6 or whatever. So they could go under the last bit of cover of darkness and actually steal the stone, the coronation stone. So Elizabeth was not crowned over the coronation stone. And George VI said this is a really bad omen for the House of Windsor. And it is. So Elizabeth has never been crowned.
So when you say a bad omen, could she actually now be the final monarch because the New World Order no longer needs the facade of a puppet monarchy?
They've all been puppets since about 1869 when Queen Victoria put her firstborn son on the throne. And then since then, Victoria was stripped of her title Queen of England and then was made Empress of India, right? That's why Victoria was made Empress of India. So the style, the title King or Monarch of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland went to us. So from 1869, there's just been a fake monarchy right through. And there's a whole lot of predictions written in the Bible, in the Rosicrucian cosmography, in the Book of Predictions, in the tradition received. And also there's about a 2,000-page book that comes out occasionally, and it's governed by an elite army, and the popes are only allowed to write 4 lines in it at the end of their life, and not all the popes are allowed to do that. And other people are allowed to write in it if they are fantastic prophets. So there's this 2,000-page book that predicts everything. And when the elite army comes and knocks on the door, they take you into the room so you can read it, and then they're in the room next door, and you're not allowed to take any camera or take any notes. Right. So that's another book of predictions, and I come up in the books of predictions, and all of them in the I'm in the Revelations as well, quite distinctly. It physically describes me, and I'm in the Hebrew predictions of the Mashiach. So what I'm looking at is, it's pretty obvious everything's a non-reality, and everything that is legal is actually based on a non-reality, and all of the crowns are actually based on a non-reality. And they're expecting a new king for the new age, and the person who represents the new age, the end times and the new age, which is the highest honor on the planet, is automatically the King of England. And the last person to do that was Jesus, who held the title Christ.
Right. Okay. Well, we're coming up to an hour. There was something I wanted to mention. When you watched my Lisbon Treaty video and you called for the 2 constitutional letters that had been prepared for the situation, and you amended one of them and you put them, I mean, I didn't write them, but you put them on your Facebook page. Somebody has come to me and said, how does she get copies of what you've done? Have you uploaded them on your website yet?
Yes. If you go to my website, kingof.uk, and in the top left corner there's downloads and documents, and you go there, you can download them. And I'm also putting them inside my videos, but a cleaner copy is kingof.uk, top left corner, downloads and documents. Yeah.
And you put them there?
Yeah.
Greg, will you come back?
Oh, I don't know, cup of tea maybe.
Okay, well, we'll discuss a date off air. So I'd like to say thanks, Greg, because you just pack so much into these hour sessions, and hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh, it's great. I enjoy it. It's very good. I like it, and I like your interview style. It's good. I never seem to get done what I wanted to do.
Well, you're coming back, I hope.
Well, I'll come back because I want to read, um, because of my position, right? So when I write stuff on my computer and actually don't send it, they go in and they look at all the stuff on my computer and they react to it, right? So I can put up a notice and they will react to that notice and they'll think he's going to lodge that, and then I don't lodge it for 2, 3 years, and then they go, but we've reacted to it. So that means that some of my stuff, when it actually does come out, is quite predictive, and other people will look at it and go, "Oh, he's just writing stuff that's already happened," but it's actually causation material.
I get you. I get you. Are you actually saying though that the other side is reading it on your computer?
Oh, well, they just download everything off my computer and have people go through and read it and go, "Oh, this is the latest copy. We'll pass this on," and they read it and they go, "It's okay." So that is a court can declare that the entity commonly known as Queen Elizabeth II can be restrained from acting in the office of throne, and or restrained from acting in the office of the crown, and or restrained from acting with the style Queen, and or restrained from acting with the style Her Majesty, and or restrained from acting with the title Queen, and or restrained from acting with the title Her Majesty, and or restrained from using any royal style or titles whatsoever, and or have all Elizabeth's styles and titles rescinded, backdated to her illegitimate birth.
Wow. On that note, you're going to come back. I'll be back. I want to say thank you to everybody at home for watching and listening. You know, please do look at Greg's website and let's see if we can take back control. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody, and see you all again soon. Bye for now.